everybody. All right, everybody, if we can have your attention, please. Could everybody return to their seats? We're going into the final session. This is a time we have to get you back from your working groups. How many here, show of hands, how many here are completely suffering from jet lag right now? Show of hands. How many are completely, oh my goodness. Everybody's got jet lag. Can we give those colleagues a big hand? The colleagues who are really suffering. And can we make sure that there's extra caffeine available immediately? Now, if we could now turn your attention here, I'm inviting Mark back up. Mark, if you, oh, Mark's going to go around. So this is what's going to happen. We're going to go and take about 15 minutes per scenario. Sorry, everybody, I do need your attention now. I'm sorry. We're going to do about 15 minutes per scenario. Oh, there's some sidebars here. What do I do? Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you're just going to run it like a professional. And when you don't, I'm going to do something. I'll have it. Thanks. Mark's going to guide you through it. So let's have his undivided attention. We have a last hour. Jet lag will soon be behind you. Mark, please take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Uncle Tommy. That's great. Or was it Fred? Sorry. You got a red card on Uncle Dick, so I'm moving on. I'm not putting up with that. Right. So you're all arranged in lines, right? So we have one world down here, we have another world down here, and we'll get to you a lot later. So in this avenue, and we're deliberately walking to the back of the room. Did you notice that's deliberate? We have a particular world. So who is your table leader? Excellent. So you get to go first. This is the fun thing, right? So just in terms of the three things, challenges, risks, and opportunities that existed in your world, and if you could tell us what your world looked like really quickly, that would help.
Yeah, sure. Well, challenges, few about agricultural jobs, few and affected by low wages.
Which world?
Ah, sorry. We are
Doomed.
the scenario 1, survival of the richest. So agricultural jobs, regarding that, few and affected by low wages.
We need to all give him our attention, everybody. Please, let's have some full attention at the back. Thank you.
High unemployment rates, urbanization, lack of generational renewal. Well, people is moving obviously from the rural areas to the cities, increasing poverty. Regarding agribusinesses, well, limited with few consumers, not access to technical assistance, finance, education, and so on. Food quality, well, safety, wide malnutrition, undernourished, big percentage of the population undernourishment. And regarding climate smart agriculture, well, it's not going to be taken into account. It's not a priority in that scenario. I mean, in that scenario, it's not that we are going backwards. Well, subsistence is the main concern in that in scenario 1.
Okay, so I'm now unemployed. That's not good stuff. I don't like that.
Well, what else?
So can I just, one quick thing. Can I ask the rest of your world? Because there's 4 different versions of your world down there. Any other members of this world see this world in a different way? Any of the other tables got a different view of the challenges, risks, and opportunities? Do you all agree with each other?
Well,
Come on.
Well, I am in question 1.
Yeah?
Not in opportunities.
So question 2 then.
Well, question 2, we were discussing about that, well, a country like this obviously have a lot of challenges and risks. Most of them related with social turmoil, risks about rebellion, opportunities regarding that improvement of the policies towards a more open market, trade agreements, which is not common in these days. And obviously, this policy supporting extension services, raising awareness about climate change, implementing climate change agriculture, and food safety, among others.
Okay, all right. We're going to go down to a different part of the world. We're going to help Ed down there because he's not very connected. So Ed, this is how this game plays out. I love this because now you get the microphone. You see? So did you agree? Did you happen to agree with what they just said on question 2? Or is your unconnected world a bit different, Ed?
Well, I think the way we approached question 2 was that today, if the scenario that we addressed in 1 takes place, what are the challenges, the risks, and the opportunities that we need to address today to not get there? That was the approach we took. Because frankly, we don't want to live in a world that's survival of the richest. Okay? Do I get a mazel tov on that? Okay. So if what we're going to address today, we talked, for example, about creating peer-to-peer economies. Okay? We talked about how you can create a larger governance structure that sort of shares the knowledge, shares the opportunities, and shares the wealth. Kind of think about an Airbnb or an Uber for agriculture. How about that? Because when we think of our scenario in 2050, it's very much a Hunger Games scenario, and we don't want to get there. Okay? So if you've seen the Hunger Games, District 1's a great place to live, but if you're in District 12, hey, not so great. So how can we create some learning among these different districts, different nation states, different groups of people? Now also there's got to be investment in infrastructure as well, because our scenario in 2050 is one where there's great inequality. The resource use of the richer areas is obviously quite good. It has been exploited, but the unconnected and the resource poor are left out, hung out to dry. So if we think today about mutual gain and mutual benefit and the mutual risk of minimizing inequality, the investments we take on today can stop that from occurring. But the governance structures that we put in place today across these peer-to-peer economies and peer-to-peer networks can introduce greater transparency and help to validate those structures across nations and across peoples. That's enough. I think I'll shut up from there.
Okay, jolly good. So Ed just connected the world. Now, does anyone else in this similar world have a different view? Anyone else? You're all agreeing? It's a lot more connected than we thought. But you're all on the same page? Everyone's happy? Oh, hang on. There's trouble. The boss is not convinced. Watch out, Ed.
I'm not convinced yet. So the interesting part about these 4 potential future worlds is that each world has advantages and disadvantages, believe it or not. Each one of them has some advantages as well, even the bottom left corner, which is what we're discussing here. When you live in a more isolated world or in a less connected world, you actually generate a lot of innovation. Imagine when the Middle East all of a sudden, because the trade is collapsing, cannot import food anymore, or the water availability will become a problem. There will be a tremendous spur of innovation and creativity. Desalination will get billions of dollars of investment. It will accelerate the pace of that happening dramatically. I'm just throwing this into the room for discussion. We should not assume that what we see today is the best way to do things and the trajectory that we have. Let's think pretty deep. How can we prepare for each one of these 4 worlds? Because it's not like you say, I don't want to prepare for it, I want to avoid it. Right? That's not actually the question. The question, we could literally live in this world in 10 or 15 years from now, which is exactly what I'm sure you said at the outset. Sorry, I wasn't in the room. So in anticipating that, how can we maximize and optimize innovation today, even in anticipating the different scenarios that are in front of us? Not just assuming today is great because we are fully connected. At the moment, everybody looks to Silicon Valley and a few others to do the innovation, and hopefully it'll all trickle down to everyone. But that stops other people from getting creative and innovative. So what can we do to stimulate this, even though it's not the current trend? Just one thought that probably hasn't come up.
Okay, straight on the money there, because if you look at Israel, They have some of the best water technology on the planet, and they did that because they were in a totally unconnected world. They were cut off from the rest of the planet. So it's not always bad, is it? Sergey's going to disagree now. Good. Go on.
When we discussed question number 2 and said what will be different in that world and what we need, what kind of the new drivers of growth will be, we talk mainly about the focus, because in all 4 areas maybe we'll need to do the same: innovate, invest, infrastructure. So it's not about the list of the public goods and things which needs to be done, but the focus on each area. And I think I want to probably emphasize 2. The first, because it will be the world of the self-sufficiency, no comparative advantage, local economy development. The investment into the technology and education, R&D needs to cover more topics than in the more open economy. So because the country had to deal with many issues and had to rely on its own investments. So it was number 1. I think it's echo what just Jürgen said. And second is also investment in safety nets needs to be done much earlier, or in sort of thinking, because the future in all of the 4 blocks is the aging population. And the problem is the world now aging much faster as its grow rich. And so safety nets in the country with the old people, and you have the large inequality in that scenario, but not a lot of income. So thinking about the sustainability of safety nets in this scenario needs to be start thinking over. But all other issues, what the other table said, we agree. Just the focus of what exactly you do, I think may be different between different blocks. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So on World 1, because you've only got 15 minutes, it would normally be much longer than this. But I'm going to have to push you to answer question 3. So what's the AGGP, or what's the World Bank doing in this solution space? And you want to be volunteer? Andrew. Perfect. Just say who you are.
Andrew Goodland, based in Addis. We did get that point on the innovation. I mean, another opportunity from this world we see is that with governments not talking to each other or in active engagement, it may drive civil society to be more connected. And I think that would be an opportunity and a positive, and something where maybe the bank can also play a role in its convening power. Just so in terms of question 3, what the World Bank can do. I mean, in a scenario which, to get to that scenario, will require a certain amount of sort of alternative facts. I mean, the bank can play a role in being a evidence-based, independent knowledge broker. And I think that we thought as a table that the bank can probably up its game doing this. I mean, certainly, maybe not with the US administration, but across the world, the bank is recognized for this. And we need to do more of it at a country level, but also at a meta level. We can play a role in our support to international organizations, because it requires internationalism to help us to prevent moving to a more isolationist world. As I say, we have convening power for private sector, government, civil society, and also in terms of our investments, if we can demonstrate impact, if we can demonstrate the advantage of moving to a more resource-efficient consumption and a higher connectivity world, it's a very powerful to show, to chart a pathway forward which takes us away from this scenario. Let me stop there.
Okay, thanks for that. Now we've got about 3 minutes left for one of the tables that hasn't said anything. Anyone particularly volunteering, or is everyone running away from the microphone? You're being pointed at, Ira. That's even worse, right? Did you want to go for it? No? Winston. Okay, you're off the hook. The manager trying to drop you in. That was unbelievable. Go. Yeah. Well, how do we fit into making this a change?
Well, building off of what Andrew had said, first of all, of course, is that convening power, but more importantly is we can help in terms of helping governments create a kind of a platform, governance structure platform, where we can where they can look at with the prices or regulatory reform, and really pushing governments to think beyond the 5-year plans that they all have. The key is to look at these other scenarios down the road. I think that's some area that we can play a key role. We also have data on our side, and I think we need to capitalize on using the data to help with the scenario analysis. I think that is where we can do more of, especially in the first session this morning, spoke heavily about that futuristic outlook, and I think we need to play a bigger role in that regard. The other thing that we saw is collaboration. Of course, we normally go in and we work with the Ministry of Agriculture, but we need to do much more cross-collaborative, cross-ministry work, because the solutions are not hinged in one ministry or in one sector. They're actually collaborative. So that's one of the things we came up with.
Okay, so now we're going to deliberately make it more complicated again, because we're going to not go to you lot. You've all been waiting to answer the question. You're far too prepared. But let's go to somewhere it's a little bit, the world looks very different. Ethel pointed out they're now up on the wall. You know, the 4 different scenarios. We deliberately took them down so you would try not to move from one to the other. You would deal with your own one, but now they're up on the wall so you can see where they are. So who's volunteering to explain your world and the challenges, risks, and opportunities in the world that you all faced? Don't all volunteer at once, because otherwise you just end up getting volunteered. Abdullah's pointing. It seems to be it's a good tactic, Abdullah. There we go. Fantastic. So just say who you are and answer question 1.
Yeah, my name is Time Fudge, and I'm based in Malawi. We are in scenario number 3, where we are looking at the open resource sustainability. Basically, I think we are looking at the combination of resource-efficient consumption and highly connected markets. In there, I think we are looking specifically at the jobs. With this scenario, basically, I think there will be more jobs that will be created, or potential for more jobs, especially looking at the whole value chain from production to logistics. However, with the potential, we are also looking at the requirement for the skills that will be demanded by the new jobs that will be created. And in terms of, I think we already seen that, I think with this development, I think in the process, I think we will see that some of the poor farmers will be losers because of the issues of the skills. I think basically the older ones will not have the skills to compete in the open economy. In terms of what should be done now, I think we are looking at continued providing the use of ICT, and especially I think we've seen that, I think like in India, where ICT has been used, we've seen, I think, most of the youth coming back to agriculture, especially in the agribusiness sector. And we also noted that I think there will be a requirement for increased connectivity, because I think in most of the developing countries, I think connectivity is a problem, is a major challenge. So if we expand connectivity, I think that will also promote use of ICT. And in terms of what should be done now, in order to address inequalities, I think we are looking at, for those that will be losers, I think in the short term, safety net programs should be an option for them. But in the medium and long term, I think we are looking at continuing providing skills, so that I think we should not continue providing subsidies or safety nets. And what the GP should be doing now, I think we have looked at...
Hold that tension for 1 minute, because we're going to get someone else to answer that question, if that's okay with you. So interestingly, that's the golden quadrant, right? That was the one that everyone would love to have been in, but that table immediately came up with there are losers. Goes back to Jürgen's point about not every one of these is good nor bad. There's issues in all of the quadrants. There's trade-offs. So did any... we've got losers there, which are basically smallholder farmers, if I heard you right. Yeah. So who else... did you all find other winners and losers in this world?
Hi, my name is Barbara Farnelli, and I'm based in Brazil. I'll try to summarize a little bit our conversation here. So in this scenario, although we are in the optimal scenario, who's going to benefit most from that scenario is the people with more better access to technology and better natural resources management. And although we are in the very in a very comfortable scenario, we discussed that we should. It's very important to innovation is very important because we're discussing about the biological evolution. The soils, and if there's a problem with bees and water availability, so there are always. Although also the consumers is it's now and has a much better power because they are better connected, they have better information, they want to know where the food are coming from. Their behavior will change, and so we needed to, and there's a problem of in this scenario, as I was saying, who has a better access to technology and better access to natural resources, it's going to be a winner in that scenario, and we need to include those, the farmers, and then go back to the losers that would not have access to those things. So then I answer you what we should be doing to really bring these people back to that with RGP.
Yeah. Okay, so now if I'm hearing a little bit of an interesting story, which is the winners win more, and if you're not on the train, then you don't win. So this quadrant starts becoming a lot about equality and inequality and how we manage those trade-offs and that imbalance, which of course, for the golden thing that everyone would want to have been in, what we realize is a highly unequal, problemed kind of scenario, which is intriguing. So, going back to that, who's got a little bit more to build on what would we be doing today that would not lead us to some of these what seem to be pretty toxic trade-offs in the golden quadrant?
So one of the things that sort of we talked about was data privacy and data access, because this quadrant was talking so much about being based on increased sort of data generation and acting on that. So we talked a lot about that and the importance of both building government regulatory capacity in that area, as well as instituting common standards and stuff like that. The other issue that we talked about that I think didn't really come up so far is the R&D part of it. That there's going to be a high R&D kind of requirement in this kind of scenario, and promoting investment into R&D through public-private partnerships is one of the areas that we could be working on.
Okay, so that's an interesting segue into where does the AgGP and the bank fit? Because is that something we normally do? Do we normally really do that well at promoting R&D and driving this forward? So we need to push R&D and we need to address inequality. Which table would like to get into what we should be doing now to address these kind of issues later on? See, Abdullah's right there. Adama, just say.
Yes, in the table we thought that indeed, even though we are in an ideal world, we are nonetheless very exposed to systematic shocks, and the challenge is, how to keep the system going, and investing in global public goods with the private sector becomes something that is really crucial, not only for climate smart nutrition, etc., but what would be the food for the future, and how can you make that as inclusive as possible? So it may be a combination of public financing, private financing and giving incentive to the public, to the private sector to work with the public system and the global public system, in particular the CGIAR, for anticipating the risk of tomorrow. This is one of the challenging. The other challenge is how to keep as low as possible the number and the scope of the incidents of the system on the losers. Farmers and consumers, and maybe some agribusinesses. And this will also require a consensus building globally on key challenges. And we do believe that the food security, food safety, and food quality would be the growing challenges in the system and cannot be just managed on one side, but with a global consensus, because the risk to climate and external shock will be even more important. And maybe the agreement that is in place need to be monitored very closely. And also we have to have a global system, a global early warning system to manage the risk wherever the signs is popping up, to have a reactive system that can address it efficiently.
Okay, so that's good news. We're going to have to manage risks to look after the vulnerable. So we've got like 3 minutes left. In terms of the Ag GP, did any other tables want? You can't have 2 bites of the cherry. It just wouldn't be. Another table? Yes, sir. Your name.
Thank you. I think for this group, my name is Adubi Abimbola from Liberia, GP Agric. Now, for this team, our discussion centered on what the GP should be doing in terms of preparing for the golden age. And the first thing that we said is that we should prepare for digital agriculture. In other words, for all our operations now, we should look how we can access and use data like climate change data, demographic data, and how we can have access to it and use it efficiently in preparing for the new age. And then we also said we should try to bring in groups like CGIA, UN system together and create a kind of big bang in preparing each country operation for what we expect to happen in 2050. Then secondly, since we are also thinking in terms of resource efficient consumption, the 2 major resources are land and water resources. And we feel going forward, for all our operations which effectively utilizes land and water resources, we should ensure that we use champions from other GPs. This is in a kind of combined operation, so that when we have an operation, we pick champions from each of these GPs to be part of the team. And then going forward, these mandatory team members will be able to channel the way forward for the way we operate it across the GPs.
Okay, fantastic. And timing is just unbelievable. What's really interesting is that you all did a lot better than a whole bunch of other people did on this scenario, because you're all actually taking into account the thing about different stakeholders. So invariably what happens when you run this type of exercise is people just look at it from one lens. What's interesting is you all have managed to not do that. So you are bringing out these trade-offs and the implications in the future and bringing it back to today. So you are the A class, which is amazing, given that most of you probably have jet lag of some description or other, and or are desperate for oxygen in this particular room. Now, the box number 2, which of course I lovingly refer to as the race to the bottom of the bucket, unchecked consumption, right? So we've got health bills through the roof, we basically don't have any trees left on the planet, the water's all gone, but maybe there are some golden gems that lie within it. It's not just that simple, right? So who would like to, quote unquote, volunteer?
Mark, let's also, whoever's speaking, please stand up so people can see you and tell us again who you are. We'll just have a final push here.
You may have just frightened everyone away now. You know
That's right. I've ruined it for you completely.
I was trying to make it easy, but okay, all right. Okay, so you're in the spotlight and life just got more complicated. So, is that a hand in the air? Excellent, fantastic. So, what world are you in, and what are these big challenges, risks, and opportunities? And then a little bit about what could be done now to either build on that or avoid that, or however you want to go.
Okay, thank you. So this scenario, I guess we consider this to be the scenario, the country on steroids. Everything is working extraordinarily well. Consumption is up. You have a combination of resource-intensive consumption, highly connected markets, technology use, etc. So we consider the challenges, and we thought that we could bucket the challenges into 4 areas. For this, we consider that on climate-smart agriculture, because of the large and unmitigated use of natural resources that are actually not priced, you have here a depletion of natural resources, and even for that, that we would not, in this economy, get climate change that we will get climate change well past 2 degrees of global warming. The second one is that in this economy, we thought of the fiscal effects, where because the consumption patterns are so poor, then the health outcomes are also really poor, leading to large health costs. And so in line with that, you also have a labor force that is not very efficient. And then on the opposite side of that, though, you do have a lot of trade, good trade in this economy. And so that counterbalances it, but certainly for not for very long. The third is that while multinationals prosper in this environment, the small and medium enterprises are largely squeezed out of the market. And so over time, we felt that this would be an issue, particularly again, as it relates to the externalities regarding labor, etc. And then small farmers are unable to sustainably enter the food supply and the value chains. And then the last challenge we saw is that in countries that are more net importers, they actually risk, they suffer multiple risks and can end up being extremely fragile since they are price takers and largely may become food insecure. So as we considered the second question, which focused largely on what can or how can some of these challenges, risks, and opportunities be addressed by relevant stakeholders, we thought that in that environment, the government certainly perhaps needs to look at developing a long-term strategy for addressing some of these risks, with key policies in place to address some of these risks. We also felt that the government can also take a look at how they can include many different stakeholders as they consider this 2050 strategy. They also needed to consider the true cost of production and include the cost of natural resources, including water, etc., in the price of goods, and that they could look at incentives to protect natural resource management, and they need to look as well at better information to provide more information to farmers, etc., and also provide more information on health. So the last area that we wanted, and that's just one of the stakeholders, we thought perhaps that in the last area, in terms of what the GP can do, we felt that the GP now, in order to look to the future, needs to perhaps address the talent mix within the GP to ensure that as we look at these issues in countries that are multi-sectoral, that require less of a siloed approach, that we find talent within the GP that actually can address address the issues that would be faced by these stakeholders, including smallholders, including industry, government, CSOs, etc. We also, in that, thought that we needed to find ways to have more multi-sectoral approaches. Looking at the third point, we talked about a paradigm shift in the way we do business. And there was a key question about whether we should be focusing on democracies and whether we shouldn't focus on those countries that, for one reason or the other, can take a much more longer-term vision of their development and be able to implement over a much longer period of time than perhaps is the case in democracies that change every 3 or 4 years, or even shorter.
Before we actually decide, we're now this lot is like the government of the world. I mean, woo! But it was interesting though, right? Thank you for that, Listra. It was interesting though. It was a very regulatory response, right? Now it looks like they kind of answered every question in enormous detail, but that was interesting. I mean, you also then decided that you were also in charge of the GP, and we had a talent search and everything else going on. So. You guys are dangerous, very dangerous. Did anyone not kind of see this world in that way? Did anyone, it's kind of a negative world that they were in. I called it the race to the bottom of the bucket. That was deliberate on my behalf. Did any of you kind of pick up some positive pieces of what this world looks like? Well done. Here we go. Sorry.
Yes, Mark, thank you. We picked up some positive pieces. There must be many market opportunities in this world. And so those are the ones that you need to develop. We also thought that there's a lot of opportunities for adaptive technologies. Okay, the world is getting warmer, so you just need to address it. It would not necessarily be CSA technologies, climate smart technologies, because the mitigation side wouldn't be very important. Then we also thought, well, there's going to be low food prices. So that's good for everybody. You can eat cheaply. But we need to make sure that those people that fall by the wayside, that they also can eat. So you need a social protection network. And the last thing we thought is there are tremendous opportunities for a health and nutrition network here. For making sure that you start addressing all these people that are obese. Now we also had some responses for the GP. A little bit in line, we also are kind of good in sitting there above and thinking about what Ethel and Jürgen have to do. But so one thing we thought is kind of, this is very much a world where agriculture is highly interdependent of other kind of sectors. Now, what does that kind of require? It requires that we set the agenda. You got it? We don't only set the agenda for the agriculture group, we set the agenda for every GP in the World Bank that wants to think about agriculture.
God, tough
and
crowd.
no, this is very serious. We had this study done by African Development Effectiveness. 56% of the lending on agriculture in Africa is done by the agriculture GP. 44% is done by all these amateurs outside. Yeah? So we need to make sure they do the right thing. Yeah? And so we.
Is that a green card or a yellow card? I don't know.
Double green.
We need to start making sure that we set the agenda in the right way. Not only for ourselves, but also for our friends in irrigation. Also for our friends in GP Sur. Also for our friends in energy. So we need to make sure we think about all those. Then we had another thing we need to think about. In this world, we need to merge with IFC.
Okay, so this row is renamed When I Rule the World. God, blimey. This is unbelievable. Okay, it's good. We're certainly crowdsourcing some new ideas, although it sounds like there might be a revolution before we get to 5 o'clock. Senior managers and managers may want to leave the room now. I'm just saying it may be. Looks like it's going that way. Did we have any other, apart from world domination, plans around what the Ag GP could be doing in not ending up in racing to the bottom of the bucket, or, as Willem's table's pointing out, a world full of opportunity? It may not be an opportunity for very long, but in the short term. Got it?
Oh, all right. Hi, my name's Mercedes. So I think building on some common themes across our row, but also the other tables, we talked about the need to sort of change the incentives for the winners in this system. So how do we change the way that multinationals approach nutrition, approach sustainability in their supply chains? How do we approach the way consumers make decisions about what kinds of foods to buy and what the impacts of those decisions are on the environment and on their nutrition? We also talked about helping the losers to benefit from the opportunities that have been mentioned. So it might be through access to finance, productive alliances, so helping them aggregate and link better with the private sector. We talked also about safety nets for the poorest, because there may be some people who, for whatever reason, access to finance, capital, land, don't have the ability to really compete in this world. So how can we help them gain access to education and help them move up or move into other sectors? And then we talked about sort of helping our government clients move the agenda a little bit. And think about where they can provide a better enabling environment for the private sector without replacing it, and do a better job of providing good public goods like good regulation and enforcement, and where necessary, other types of regulatory or policy incentives to change people's behaviors at the margins. And in terms of the specific things that the AgGP can do, we talked about more programmatic operations. So we didn't talk about it in the context of dictatorships, but we did talk about the need, especially when you're talking about sort of building the basic rural infrastructure and CDD type approaches, to take a much more long-term 5, 10, 15-year view than a single one-off project. We also talked about opportunities for helping our clients think about more green growth, so helping them sort of do a visioning exercise and look at where they can grow their agriculture sector in greener ways, and providing forums for South-South learning. So what can China and Chile teach other countries about how they've made their agriculture greener? And then finally, on sort of the climate change and de-risking agriculture, we talked about weather-based insurance and other policy and incentive instruments that can help farmers adapt in a context where the climate is going to continue changing, and hopefully change their behavior to have it change a little bit less.
Okay, so that one
And world
was
domination.
that was good. So it's interesting. The totally unconnected world over there all agreed with each other. The connected world have gone from world domination to globalization on steroids. So it's interesting, though, how it brings out all these different things. I mean, as soon as Jürgen hit that thing about opportunity as well as risks, it starts opening up, thinking about things in slightly different ways. So last but not least, of course, we have local is the new global. So, there's some people are doing well. Gene, what happened? Okay, all right. Gene's not doing well. He's a table of his own. Obviously, no one decided to agree with Gene. Who would like? Gene, would you like to introduce this for us and what you thought? Sure. Yeah, excellent. Right, so here it is from Gene.
Hi, Gene Moses. I'm the IFC rep that's about to be taking over with the AgGP. Thanks, Willem. So this scenario, local is the new global with the low connectivity and resource efficiency. Basically, low trade benefits, right? But it's very much a local environment on steroids in a sense. You have the innovation that was mentioned earlier because you're in a microenvironment, combined with a lack of trade, which forces innovation. Okay, I don't have a team, but I love this exercise. Who are some of the winners and losers, or should we go risks and opportunities? I think risks and opportunities. Risks are that everything becomes so localized, you don't get the benefits of scale and the benefits across markets that we get today with higher connectivity. So you get a lot of reinventing the wheel. What that does do is create opportunities for many innovators in individualized markets. And that diversity, if it were to be accepted, would be a boon for market information for traders or the like. So someone being able to, like in the old world with the Silk Road, you had individuals who were able to step into different worlds and arbitrage that information. So on the flip side of that is certainly markets that have poor resources or low resources are going to be very limited in what they can do and what that world would be. And you can only drink so much camel milk if that's all you have. But there's a lot of ways to make it and process it, and different jobs and variety during that value chain. That's the innovation we're talking about. I'll leave it there. That's it.
Okay, excellent. Does anyone, I like Gene's world, that was interesting. So out of the rest of this versions of this world, excellent. Other challenges, do you see anything different from that, or are you agreeing with the IFC? I mean, sorry, Gene.
No, I think my wife works for IFC, so I don't have a choice but to agree with whatever IFC says. So just to summarize quickly what we had discussed in terms of the challenges, risks, and opportunities. I think in terms of jobs, we felt that shorter supply chains limit kind of job growth, and it also kind of gets the wages down, and also there's limited benefits from specialization and comparative advantage. And also in terms of risk, I think there's a high dependence on the size of your domestic market. So in case where your domestic market is small and your is big and your natural resource base is small, you're going to end up in a very bad situation in this kind of a scenario. And you're highly vulnerable to climate shocks, while because you're kind of have local innovation and you have resource efficient consumption, you can adapt to smaller climate variations because you have, say, perhaps varieties which are suitable to those particular regions. But if you have a climate shock disaster, then you're going to end up in a bad state. In terms of the opportunities, we thought that it's really the ideal kind of world if you want to kind of come up with innovations on local diets, local kind of nutritious food which is kind of specific, and also because you have smaller supply chains, the chances of branding it organic food and as locally made food and making turning it to high value is higher. Also, there's lower carbon footprint because of the smaller supply chains. Also, we discussed what can be done today, given if we are going to end up in that scenario in 2050. One is, of course, I think given that we have to rely on self-sufficiency, we will promote a more diversified food system, also invest in local technology, specifically on productivity enhancement in the local area, and also promote local adaptation, and also say smaller water harvesting structures, smaller storage structures, because that the world is not going to be connected. You not have big supply chains and big warehouses which will make it more efficient. And what can AgGP do? I think in terms of technical assistance, I think we should focus more on productivity and local technology development, and also prioritize regions which have a lower natural resource base because they are most vulnerable. So we will prioritize our technical assistance to those regions, and within those regions, those communities which are more vulnerable, because we know that in this kind of scenario, they will really be on the receiving end. And finally, I think given that 2050, this is the kind of scenario that's going to end up, perhaps as bank, as the AgGP, we should promote a lot of knowledge exchange across different regions. So each region is able to develop the same kind of knowledge base, and they're able to survive in that scenario. Anything else, guys?
Goodness. I'm really glad I'm not a note taker today, because I mean, you're all coming out with so much stuff. It's quite unbelievable, but it's amazing when you kind of free your mind as to where it takes you. But all this is being captured, right? So we will actually, I'm not joking about crowdsourcing. So if we can focus on what is it that the AgGP can be doing?
Okay, thank you. Chris Brett with Global Engagements. We had an interesting conversation on this table on the grounds that we look at it as there is a lot of positives on being local, but there again, I can't imagine people giving up their coffee and their cocoa very easily. So we did actually get into the debate that there could be local food crops or staples, including vegetables, but there still will be a global trade in vegetable oils and your cocoa and your coffee and so on. So it is hard to be fully local. That was an interesting area. The other thing that we also thought was the bank has to have a strong emphasis on food safety and supporting the market quality, because at the end of the day, as we shorten these supply chains, then these markets that are evolving have to have more food safety aspects put to them. We also acknowledge, of course, is that there will be a disruption of the multinational supply chains as we go more local. So costs would go up. There's no two ways about that. And it would isolate a lot more people who are in those urban growth areas which are dependent on imported bulk food and staple items. So there's a lot of issues there. There'd have to be some sort of soft landing on how it transitions. So the bank would have to do a lot of support for really building the agricultural supply chains from the production, the local production, into the local market, i.e. within national boundaries. You know, obviously we talk about the growth of the secondary cities, and we can localize agriculture, you know, down as we can go further down, but the national agricultural vision would have to be to really strengthen and build those linkages. So I think those are some of the key points that we would just add to.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. Did any of the rest of this planet have anything to add on what the AgGP could be doing? Of course, it's quite mixed up because you're looking almost at two very different worlds, right? One that's doing quite well and one that's not doing well at all, but there's some level of connectivity. Steve, you seem to have been given the microphone, which will give you the last word. I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to, but
It's not working, which is great.
if you talk at it.
There we go. Steve Jaffe. We actually had a solution for the coffee and tea and cocoa, and that is basically to put it indoors, right? So we're going to be looking at glass houses, greenhouses, and essentially having a lot of technology and science to import substitute, in a sense, for the tropical commodities if you're not in the tropics. Yeah, it really is two different worlds. I mean, we have Berkeley, California, right, which is able to take care of itself in an area that's well endowed, and there you're really looking at the strengthening of local government and sort of landscape initiatives in those areas, as opposed to sort of federal governments, which are maybe less important. But these areas, you know, the Berkeley, Californias that are going to be self-sufficient are going to be getting lots of migrants coming from the other areas that aren't able to feed themselves. So some of the biggest risks of this is essentially you're almost in the survival of the richest kind of setting there, because some entities will have a much more healthy diet, will have a much more transparent food system, will be much more conscious of where things come from. And then you have large populations that are not going to be able to go that route. And they'll be showing up at the doorsteps, I think, of Berkeley, California.
So that picks up that last interesting piece of story. Maurizio's leapt to his feet. We're in trouble. Oh, Maurizio, you're in between them and getting out of this room. So.
Last comment, and you can just...
No, just speak. It's fine.
Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Just one little sketch, just I think to finalize. I'm 87 years old. You know, I've been at the bank 57 years. Sorry, my spine has a bit of problems. We just drank some barley coffee because, of course, we have no access to coffee. And this cookie here is made mostly out of insects because the main source of protein. We are very conscious consumers. And half of you, of course, are not here because you could not get the visa, but your holograms is physically here.
Oh, you're getting a green card right now, right now.
No, just two serious comments. We had a very enjoyable conversation, and it reflects a bit what came out throughout the discussion. Most aspects can have two-sided impacts. If you want another one to barley coffee, there is the story of Gianduiotti. I don't know if you know this Italian chocolate full of hazelnuts, because during the Second World War we had no access to cocoa, and so we invented the Gianduiotti, which is, in my opinion, extremely nice, better than the one with a lot of cocoa. For instance, in terms of jobs, we had a very enjoyable discussion on what is the impact on jobs. Probably our idea is that it can be a challenge in terms of quality jobs, because having more global localized activities is more difficult to develop in a way that quality job would develop. But in terms of quantity, maybe a benefit. If you grow more vegetables, you have maybe less mechanization of these activities, more involvement in the market of fresh products, and so more quantity jobs. If you want, nutrition is an interesting case where you saw the reverse, because in terms of quantity will be more of a challenge, but in terms of quality, it may be an opportunity because you have more quality food, more local, with more vitamins and beneficial health effects. Then, of course, we spoke a lot, but I think the rest is similar to the discussion we had. The role of the bank is going to be difficult, but in reality it's not necessarily negative. Think a bit what was the bank 50 years ago. Was a world which was less integrated, more efficiency in the resources, less consumption of meat, for example, but much fewer people. And one thing that we didn't discuss but came up in my mind during whether we would have more competitions with other regional banks and active, what would be the role of the World Bank? Probably 50 years ago, the World Bank had an easier role than today because of less competition. Probably in 50 years it will not be the same, so be challenging to compete with other regional banks and other institutions do a job similar to ours.
Interesting. So that's also raising Willem's thing about hostile takeover bids of IFC and African Development Bank. So you've definitely got an ally there, right? But it's interesting as well, right? So this gang and this gang come up with this sort of innovation opportunity kind of piece of this story, and yet necessarily you wouldn't have thought that they were in the best quadrants. So very quickly, in summary, I'm not going to bother. Okay, because it's actually impossible to, yeah, and there was a bit of a clap there, right, because we need to get out of the room. But it's not about summarizing this, right? So the thing about the scenarios is that there is no right answer, because we just simply don't know. And any time that we say that we know what the future is going to be like, and we're sitting on a bunch of uncertainty, then we've really got a question. So it's a question of time, uncertainty, and variables. And that's exactly what our clients deal with all the time when they're coming together to put the investment packages and everything else together, right? Now, the time horizon may be different, and maybe our challenge is extending that time horizon. But things are certainly going to look a lot different further out. The importance of applying different lenses, you know, and the natural assumption that certain things are bad and certain things are good. At some level, everyone in the room, and me when we sat down and came up with and cooked this thing up, right, thought that top right hand was what it was all about, right? It's always called the golden leaf quadrant. That's what it's called. It's there for a reason, and the reason is that when you unpack it, it isn't. It just simply is not that simple. And so when we're actually putting together the policy, when we're putting together the investments, and we think we're going towards the golden quadrant, the question always has to be, are we really? Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your understanding. And handing back to you, sir.
Well done, ladies and gentlemen. Let's thank him properly. Let's thank him properly. After me, thank you, Uncle Dick. And we actually, what seemed a bit effortless, there was a big team behind this that went through this, ran the scenario. So really, let's give them a big hand. Well done. And Madame Sennhauser, give us a couple of words of wrap-up, please, and then we'll get on.
We close for the day. I'm so happy and so proud of all of us. When we started the day, we started thinking, the future is going to be different than the world we have today. We don't know what that future is going to be, but we all started thinking about it. And we all had incredibly interesting responses on how we can address that future that is in front of us. And that's exactly why we work here, and that's exactly why we work in the World Bank. So that what we are trying to do these days, we also do it with our counterparts and our partners all over the world. And we can start planning together, making that map of the future that we are talking in the morning and trying to shape the future as we go there and getting the world future ready, irrespective of what that future is going to be. And we can do it in the same way as we are doing it today. So a big round of applause for all of you, because beside the team, I think that we were really good on thinking out of the box and bringing these things together. You know, just think where the world was when you were born. You know, and I don't want to really here disclose my age, but you know, I was born before the detergent existed. And the world has changed so much in just some decades. And by the time we all leave the bank, the world will be very different than the world it is today. And our legacy for working in the World Bank is to try to leave that world better off than the one we inherited today. Whatever that world is going to be, we're working in the bank and we have the power to leave it better off. So that's why it's our moral duty and our moral responsibility to think about all this future and to try to plan ahead, bring it today, build scenarios, whatever trend we want to think moving forward, to try to work all together so that that world is a much better world, irrespective of which of these 4 scenarios we're going to be in the future. So thank you very much for embracing this, and thank you very much for everyone that worked on this. Can you please stand up if you were part of this exercise? All the ones who facilitated this. They were all, yes, stand up, stand up. Thank you very much for helping us to think. Okay? So tomorrow we have a very interesting agenda too. We are going to start thinking about some of the trends that we know. We're bringing people to help us to think again. So try to be here on time. We're going to start sharp 9 o'clock again. We're going to talk about some of these trends that we know are happening, demographics and what's going to happen and how that's going to affect our world, irrespective of where we are in the world. What are the trends on technology and innovation? What's going to come? How can we adjust to that? Fragility, conflict. How does that impact what we are going to do? And then at the end of the day, we are going to have a very interesting session on communications. Those of you who have been here since the very beginning know how important it is for us to communicate in a different way. It's not what we know, it's how we say it. And we keep on impressing that it's important for all of us to say what we know in a way that is convincing to others. So we'll have a very interesting session at the end of the day on communications. We're bringing someone that works on NPR to help us to think and to understand if what we are saying makes sense. If it doesn't make sense among ourselves and we all know what we are talking about, it's not going to make sense in the world. So it's very important that we learn how to communicate that better. So we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And my last word is to you, Stefan, so you can get
Absolutely.
some logistics for us.
See, I don't have to do any work here because everybody's doing it for me. Bright and early, 8:30, breakfast starts over here. You could probably even sooner. We're going to start exactly at 9. I can't believe you've done all this work despite being jet lagged. A reminder that Friday, we are not here. Friday, we move to the World Bank, just to keep in mind. Simeon, walk up here right now for the last thing. If those who are going to those spring meeting, partnership with universities, did you have some names? Just shout them out. We need a mic. We're almost done. We're almost done. Stand up while he does this. Come on, we're almost done. Simeon.
Thank you, Stephen. I need a mic because I've developed a cold. So we have an interesting event that we're preparing for the spring meeting, and this will be chaired by the Africa VP, Mark Tahar, and also Jorgen, and will be moderating the event. We need to discuss that. I mean, in preparing the event, anybody who's interested in participating in this particular activity is welcome to stay. I'm calling specifically key colleagues to remain behind for a few minutes to discuss a little bit the running of the event. So, Abla Touré, Elhaj Adama Touré, Ademola, Aniseto Bilal, Amadou Umar Ba, Asaya Legacy, Willem Johnson, Sarah Simmons, Ladisi, Kofi Nouve, I haven't seen him, I don't know if he's around, Aifa, and then in addition, Pawan, because he's at the center of organizing the logistics, Mark Kakler, Dina, Irina, and Zia, if she's around. She told me that she was going to go to the office to continue work on that. And I can't even read my own handwriting for one more name but I'll figure this out.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Thanks very much. All right.
But anyway, if you can stay behind, I'll be great. It won't take more than 30 minutes.
Right over here with Simeon. Wednesday afternoon, field trip. We'll remind you to dress appropriately. Get on out of here. Thank you very much. Well done. Well done.